On August 23, 1997, Steven Garner vanished without a trace, just 3 days after marrying the love of his life in a beautiful ceremony in Austin, Texas. For 20 years, his family and investigators wondered what could have happened to this seemingly happy, drama-free 26-year-old. Then, one day, his best friend Anthony Lewis made a chilling discovery in the attic of his old family home. A disposable wedding camera, never developed. The final images revealed a truth so shocking that even the most seasoned detectives struggled to believe what they were seeing. How could a single wedding photo unravel one of the most baffling missing person cases in Texas history? But before we dive into this haunting story, if you enjoy real-life mysteries like this one, make sure to subscribe and turn on notifications so you never miss another case. Now, let's go back to where it all began. Austin, summer of 1997. The city carried a strange energy that year. Across the country, conversations were still heavy with the recent death of Princess Diana, and cafes buzzed with speculation about the tragic accident that had stunned the world just days earlier. In the quiet suburban neighborhood of Brentwood, the Garner family had been preparing for months for what was supposed to be the happiest day of their only son's life. Steven Garner, 26, worked as a telecommunications technician since graduating from a technical college 3 years prior. Tall, dark-haired, with striking green eyes, Steven had the kind of warm, easy smile that drew people in. His co-workers described him as reliable, punctual, maybe a bit of a dreamer at times, but always willing to lend a hand. He lived in a modest apartment on 6th Street near downtown Austin, a place he had scrimped and saved for 2 years to afford. His bride, Emily Foster, 24, was a medical secretary at a local family clinic in Hyde Park. Petite, blonde, and with bright blue eyes, Emily radiated a lively energy that balanced Steven's calmer, more reflective nature. The two had met 3 years earlier at a friend's party in a bar off South Congress Avenue, and their romance grew slowly but steadily, filled with evening walks along Lady Bird Lake and movie dates at the Violet Crown Theater, their favorite spot in town. Anthony Lewis, 27, Steven's best friend since high school, worked as a mechanic at a local garage on the outskirts of the city. Outgoing and quick-witted, Anthony was the life of every party, the one who planned weekend trips, the one with a new joke ready at any moment. He lived in a small house inherited from his grandparents in Cedar Creek, complete with a dusty attic where boxes of childhood memories and old tools sat untouched for years. The Garner family had deep roots in Austin, going back 3 generations. Steven's parents, Michael and Frances Garner, both in their 50s, ran a small bakery on Guadalupe Street, a neighborhood institution since 1962. Michael, a man of few words but a big heart, shared a close bond with his son. Frances, more talkative, handled customers with the kind of warmth that kept people coming back for decades. The summer of 1997 in Texas was brutally hot. Temperatures soared well into the hundreds, and locals sought relief in swimming holes, shaded parks, or tubing down the Guadalupe River. It was the kind of summer people would remember, not just for the heat, but for the sense that the century itself was winding down, carrying with it both promise and unease. Against this backdrop, nothing hinted at the tragedy about to shatter this family's world. Steven was thriving, deeply in love, excited for his future. Just weeks before the wedding, he had told Anthony that he'd never been happier, that life finally felt like everything was falling into place. Those words would later echo with a dark irony no one could have imagined. Saturday, August 20th, 1997. The day began under a brilliant Texas sun. The ceremony was set for 3 p.m. at St. Andrew's Chapel, a small 19th-century church near the Garner family home, chosen for its intimate charm. Emily looked stunning in her ivory silk gown, hand-picked with her mother from a boutique on Lamar Boulevard. The dress, with its classic sweetheart neckline and modest train, was elegant but understated, perfect for her. Her veil, passed down from her grandmother, carried a thread of family history into this new chapter. Steven, in a charcoal gray suit rented for the occasion, stood at the altar beaming, surrounded by family and friends. The ceremony was heartfelt. Reverend Matthew Carter, who had known the Garners for over a decade, delivered a personal message that moved many to tears. Anthony, the best man, had borrowed a video camera to capture key moments, but he and Emily had also provided disposable cameras to guests to snap candid shots throughout the day, a small idea that would prove critical 2 decades later. After the ceremony, the celebration moved to Willow Creek Ranch, a rustic venue 15 minutes outside Austin, surrounded by oak trees and wide-open fields. The reception hall, decorated with white roses and greenery, overlooked the rolling countryside and could host all 80 guests comfortably. A professional photographer handled the formal portraits, the vows, the rings, the church exit, but the disposable cameras caught the unguarded laughter, the stolen glances, the spontaneous joy of the day. Dinner featured Texas favorites, smoked brisket, pecan pie, local wine selected by Michael himself. The atmosphere was warm, loud, filled with music and dancing. But around 6 p.m., as guests mingled on the terrace, Anthony noticed Steven speaking to a man he didn't recognize, about 40 years old, broad-shouldered, dressed in a dark suit. That seemed oddly formal for the occasion. The conversation looked tense. Anthony, curious but not wanting to intrude, snapped a few photos with one of the disposable cameras, capturing the moment without a second thought. He didn't know it then, but those photos would become the centerpiece of a criminal investigation 20 years later. The evening carried on. Steven laughed again, danced with Emily to galas freed from desire, and seemed to have shaken off whatever had unsettled him. The DJ, a friend of Anthony's, kept the party alive with hits from the 90s and classics for all ages. By midnight, Steven and Emily slipped away to their honeymoon suite at the Driscoll Hotel downtown, as tradition dictated, while the guests partied into the early hours. Sunday, August 21st, the couple woke up in their suite, had breakfast together, laughed over memories from the wedding, and visited both families later that day to open gifts and share photos from the professional photographer. Everything felt normal, happy, hopeful. On Monday, August 22nd, Steven returned to work. Steven's Tuesday at work seemed completely ordinary. He joked with colleagues about post-wedding fatigue, proudly showed off his new wedding ring, and talked about future plans with Emily. His manager, Mr. David Duncan, warmly congratulated him and even hinted at a possible internal promotion opening up in the technical department, a prospect that clearly excited Steven. That evening, around 6:30 p.m., Steven drove home as usual. He called Emily to check in. She had also returned to work that day, and the two agreed to meet the following evening for a quiet dinner together. Neither realized this would be the last conversation Emily would ever have with her husband. On the morning of Tuesday, August 23rd, 1997, at 7 a.m., Emily phoned Steven to wish him a good day, as she had every morning since their wedding. The phone rang unanswered. Assuming he was either in the shower or had left early for work, she didn't worry at first. By 9:30 a.m., Emily called Steven's office at the telecommunications company. The receptionist, Mrs. Bennett, told her Steven hadn't shown up and hadn't called in sick, a first for someone so reliable. Mr. Duncan, the manager, also tried reaching Steven with no success. Alarmed, Emily drove straight to Steven's apartment on 6th Street. She had the keys since their wedding. The apartment was empty. The bed was neatly made. The clothes Steven had worn the previous evening were folded on a chair, as though he had dressed for the day and left intentionally. But his car, a 1994 blue Ford Taurus, was gone. By 2 p.m., Emily contacted Steven's parents at the bakery. Michael and Frances had heard nothing from their son either. Worry began to spread through the family. Anthony confirmed he hadn't spoken to Steven since the wedding. Together, they reported him missing to the Austin Police Department downtown. Officer Mark Monroe, on duty that afternoon, took down their statements. Technically, adults missing for less than 48 hours didn't trigger full-scale investigations immediately, but the family's obvious distress, combined with the unusual circumstances, convinced the department to begin preliminary checks right away. By 6 p.m., police located Steven's car at the Austin Amtrak station parking lot. It was locked. Nothing had been forced. Inside, they found his wallet, with ID and about $40 in cash, and, more disturbingly, his wedding ring placed neatly on the dashboard, as though he had removed it on purpose. Emily was devastated. Why would Steven take off his ring after only 3 days of marriage? That question haunted her for years. Investigators checked ticket records. No one had purchased a train ticket under Steven's name. Employees on duty said they didn't recall seeing him. The following day, Wednesday, August 24th, veteran detective Jack Raymond, head of missing persons for over a decade, officially took over the case. His first move, reconstruct Steven's final 48 hours in painstaking detail. A neighbor from 6th Street, Mr. Carson, reported seeing Steven on his balcony around 10 p.m. Monday night, smoking a cigarette. He seemed normal, maybe a little pensive. That was the last confirmed sighting. Phone records showed Steven received a call at 10:45 p.m. from a payphone near Republic Square downtown. The call lasted exactly 3 minutes and 37 seconds. Investigators never learned who made it or what was said. Why would Steven leave his apartment late at night after that call? Detective Raymond's team interviewed everyone close to Steven. Colleagues said he was happy, looking forward to his honeymoon with Emily. No financial troubles, no marriage problems, no work conflicts. Anthony told investigators about the mysterious man at the wedding, the one Steven spoke to briefly before disappearing back into the party. About 40 years old, well-dressed, rugged-looking. No one at the wedding recognized him. Police quickly explored possible foul play, but Steven had no enemies, no criminal ties, no history of risky behavior. His life was quiet, work, family. A few close friends, the occasional night out downtown. They also considered voluntary disappearance, but nothing supported that theory. Steven was newly married, financially stable, optimistic about the future. His bank accounts showed no unusual withdrawals, except one. The day before he vanished, Steven had withdrawn $600 in cash from an ATM near Republic Square, the same area where the payphone call originated. Emily had known nothing about it. Was he paying someone? Being blackmailed? Investigators never found answers. Search efforts intensified that week. Police dogs combed riverside parks, wooded areas, and abandoned lots. Divers searched the Colorado River near the train station. Nothing turned up. Months passed with no breakthroughs. Emily's life collapsed. Overnight, she went from joyful newlywed to grieving wife with no answers. She refused to leave the apartment she had shared with Steven, keeping it exactly as it was, as though he might walk back in any moment. She wore her wedding ring every day. At the clinic where she worked, colleagues gave her space. Patients noticed her weight loss, the dark circles under her eyes, but she clung to routine like a lifeline. Steven's parents changed too. The bakery, once filled with warmth and laughter, became somber. Michael, already a man of few words, grew nearly silent. Frances tried to hide her tears from customers, but the sparkle in her eyes was gone. Anthony carried his own burden. He replayed that wedding night over and over. The strange man, the missed signs, the guilt that maybe he could have stopped something. His girlfriend eventually left him, unable to handle his obsession with the case. Detective Raymond refused to close the file. Even when other cases took priority, he kept digging. He believed Steven was the victim of a deliberate crime connected to that unknown wedding guest. But with no evidence, the case stalled. Then, in early 1998, a glimmer of hope surfaced. A woman reported seeing a man matching Steven's description at a gas station 30 miles east of Austin, looking nervous, glancing over his shoulder. For weeks, police searched the area, posted flyers, interviewed witnesses. The lead, like all the others, went nowhere. The year 1999 marked a turning point for everyone connected to the case. Encouraged by her therapist, Emily finally agreed to move out of the apartment on 6th Street. To her, leaving the place she had shared with Steven felt like betraying his memory. But the small studio she rented in Hyde Park, closer to her job, offered her the first fragile step toward rebuilding her life. Steven's parents, Michael and Frances Garner, made a painful decision of their own. After decades of running the family bakery on Guadalupe Street, they sold it to a young local baker. Michael, at 50, no longer had the energy to keep it going. The couple moved into a modest retirement apartment near Zilker Park, leaving behind the place that had been both their livelihood and a silent witness to their grief. Paradoxically, this break from the past helped them manage the unbearable absence of their son. Anthony, however, slipped deeper into obsession. He began spending evenings poring over newspapers, searching for patterns in other unsolved disappearances, building timelines, and scribbling theories late into the night. He moved permanently into his grandparents' old house in Cedar Creek, finding in its creaking solitude the perfect space for his growing fixation. The attic became his private war room, walls covered in newspaper clippings, handwritten notes, detailed timelines. He convinced himself that if he just kept digging, someday he would find the missing piece. By 2001, 4 years after Steven vanished, Detective Jack Raymond retired. The case passed to Detective Maria Delacroix, a seasoned 40-something investigator specializing in cold cases. She approached the file with fresh eyes, re-interviewed key witnesses, but found nothing new. The Garner case joined the growing stack of unsolved mysteries gathering dust in the archives. As the 2000s unfolded, advances in DNA testing, digital databases, and forensic techniques offered renewed hope to families of the missing. Periodically, Steven's file was reopened, cross-checked against new tools, new methods. Each time, nothing surfaced. Meanwhile, Emily slowly rebuilt her life. In 2003, she met Paul, a physical therapist in his early 40s, divorced, kind, patient. He understood that Emily carried ghosts she couldn't fully let go of. He didn't push. Their relationship grew cautiously, marked by quiet dinners and long talks rather than grand gestures. In 2005, 8 years after Steven's disappearance, Emily and Paul married in a small private ceremony. Anthony took it badly. He saw it as a betrayal, proof that Emily was abandoning the search for truth. He refused to meet Paul, cut off contact with Emily, retreating further into isolation. The woman who had once been like a sister to him became a stranger. Emily's in-laws, however, welcomed Paul with open arms. Frances told Emily one afternoon, through tears, that she believed Steven, wherever he was, would want her to be happy. Those words eased some of the guilt Emily had carried for so long. In 2008, 11 years after Steven vanished, Emily gave birth to a daughter, Emma. Her arrival felt like the beginning of a new era. Michael and Frances poured all their love into the little girl, the grandchild they had longed for, but never thought they'd have. But the years that followed brought only false hope. Sightings trickled in occasionally. Someone claimed to have seen Steven at a gas station in Oklahoma or in a cafe in New Mexico or on a bus in Arizona. Each time, investigators followed up. Each time, the trail went cold. The emotional whiplash wore everyone down. Hope, disappointment, resignation, repeat. Anthony aged quickly in that old Cedar Creek house. His hair turned gray, his face hollowed. Stress and loneliness led to heart problems. The man who had once filled rooms with laughter now spent his days alone, sorting and resorting boxes of memories in the attic, chasing answers no one else believed would come. And then, in March 2017, 20 years after Steven disappeared, everything changed. At 47, Anthony suffered a health scare that forced him into early retirement from the garage where he had worked for 25 years. His doctor, Dr. William Carter, diagnosed the beginnings of heart failure. "Anthony," he said gravely, "this house is killing you. You live surrounded by constant reminders of loss. You need to clean it out. Make space. Your heart can't take this much longer." For the first time in decades, Anthony considered it. On a gray Saturday afternoon, armed with garbage bags and cardboard boxes, he climbed into the attic, determined to finally confront 20 years of clutter. Old high, school photos, football trophies, his grandfather's tools, and then around 2 p.m., while clearing out a wooden cabinet, he found a shoebox he didn't remember storing. Inside, wedding keepsakes from August 1997, a dinner menu, his old best man bow tie, and a small yellow and black Kodak disposable camera. still sealed in its original packaging. Anthony froze. Memories flooded back. The disposable cameras Emily had handed out, his own snapshots from that night, the strange man Steven had spoken, to just before disappearing. The camera's tiny counter showed 27 out of 27 photos taken. He realized he had never developed the film. He had simply forgotten in the chaos after Steven vanished. That roll of film had sat in the attic for 20 years. Hands trembling, Anthony grabbed his coat and drove straight to Photo World on South Lamar Boulevard, one of the last places in Austin that still developed film. The young clerk raised her eyebrows at the relic. "Wow," she said. "Haven't seen one of these in a long time. Come back tomorrow afternoon. It takes a while." That night, Anthony couldn't sleep. He lay awake, heart pounding, imagining what those photos might reveal. The next day, March 19th, 2 p.m. sharp, he picked up the envelope of prints and sat in his car, hands shaking. The first photos were exactly as he remembered. The ceremony at the church, group shots, laughter on the terrace, people dancing. Then came the series from the conversation. The first photo showed Steven and the stranger in profile, speaking tensely. The second showed them face to face. Steven looked nervous. The stranger's expression was hard, almost threatening. But the last photo stopped Anthony cold. The man was staring directly at the camera, perfectly in focus. About 40 years old, short brown hair, a faint scar on his left cheek, piercing, cold eyes, and in his right hand, a brown envelope. For the first time in 20 years, Anthony was staring at the face of the man who might hold the key to everything. Who was he? What was this man doing at Steven's wedding? What was in that envelope? And above all, what connection did he have to the disappearance that followed just 3 days later? Without hesitation, Anthony Lewis drove straight to the Austin Police Department downtown. He asked to see Detective Maria Delacroix, who had overseen the Garner case since 2001. Now 56 and nearing retirement, Maria had never let go of the file that had haunted her entire career. When Anthony laid the photos on her desk, Maria's eyes widened. In 16 years, this was the first time she had something tangible, something visual, connected to Steven's final days. She studied the pictures carefully under a magnifying glass, her focus tightening on the stranger's face. "Mr. Lewis," she finally said, voice low but steady, "you may have just handed us the missing piece of the puzzle. You're certain you never saw this man anywhere else?" Anthony confirmed firmly. Maria immediately ordered the images scanned for facial recognition and sent them to the state forensics lab to enhance quality. Every detail mattered now. Word spread quickly. Emily, notified by Maria, came to the station with her husband Paul. When she saw the photo, Steven looking nervous, the stranger's cold stare, she broke down in tears. "I knew it," she whispered through sobs. "I knew Steven was hiding something in those last days. He was different, preoccupied. I should have pushed him to tell me." Paul held her, shaken himself. The man in the photo radiated something menacing, even after 20 years. Steven's parents, Michael and Frances, now in their 70s, were also shown the photos. Neither recognized the man. Frances vaguely remembered noticing someone who didn't belong at the reception, but hadn't thought twice about it at the time. The investigation roared back to life. Maria circulated the images across state and then national law enforcement networks. 3 days later, facial recognition returned a name: Victor Martin, born 1957, age 40 at the time of the wedding. His criminal record was ugly: loan sharking, threats, assault, attempted extortion. He had been flagged as a debt collector for organized crime groups, running an illegal lending operation across Texas throughout the 1980s and 1990s. This changed everything. Had Steven, quiet, responsible, newly married Steven, fallen into debt with a man like this? Maria's team dug into Steven's bank records again. Under the new lens, the details painted a darker picture: $100 withdrawals in April 1997, $200 in June, $400 in July. Seemingly small amounts at first glance, but now, strung together, they told a different story. Worse, Detectives discovered Steven had been visiting the Derby, a rundown betting parlor on the east side of Austin, long since closed but notorious in the 90s for illegal gambling and loan shark activity. Anthony admitted, reluctantly, that Steven had developed a taste for horse betting in the months before the wedding. "He always said it was just for fun," Anthony muttered. "I didn't think it was serious. Steven he was always so level-headed." Emily sat silent, stunned. The man she had married had been hiding an entire part of his life. Nights when he said he was with Anthony or working late had actually been spent gambling. Former Derby owner Robert Maynard, now 75 and retired, confirmed it when interviewed. "Yeah, I remember Steven. Nice kid. Not a big-time player at first. But near the end, he was nervous, talking about winning it all back. That's always a bad sign." Maynard also remembered Victor Martin. "He didn't gamble. He came to collect. Everybody knew not to cross him." Piece by piece, Maria reconstructed the trap. Steven's small weekend bets grew into bigger losses. When friends and banks stopped lending, he turned to Martin's operation. Martin charged interest rates up to 50% per month and used threats to enforce payment. One former debtor, John Franklin, told investigators, "I borrowed $2,000 from Martin back in '96. Within 6 months I owed him over 6. When I couldn't pay, he started showing up at my job, calling my house at night, threatening my wife. I went to the cops, but back then, nobody wanted to touch him." Steven's wedding, detectives concluded, wasn't just a celebration to Martin. It was payday. He knew Steven would have cash from gifts, maybe savings. That explained the tense conversation caught on film. The $600 Steven withdrew on August 22nd likely went to Martin as a first installment, but it wasn't enough. Hence the late-night call from the downtown payphone on August 23rd. Hence the meeting. That led to Steven's disappearance. With evidence mounting, Maria's team prepared to move on Victor Martin. 20 years late, but finally, they had a name, a face, and a motive. On Wednesday, March 29, 2017, at 6 a.m., police surrounded a small rural property near Round Rock, Texas. After 20 years, Victor Martin was finally taken into custody in connection with the disappearance of Steven Garner. At 60 years old, Martin had barely changed since 1997. The same broad shoulders, the same cold, calculating stare, the same scar running down his left cheek. Brought to the Travis County Sheriff's Office, Martin at first denied ever knowing Steven. But when confronted with the wedding photos showing him in tense conversation with the missing groom, his story shifted. He claimed he had been invited by a mutual friend, refusing to give a name. His court-appointed attorney, Mr. Blanchard, advised him to remain silent. But Detective Maria Delacroix, with decades of experience, knew how this would go. She let Martin sit in a cell for hours, stewing, while her team worked feverishly to tighten the noose. By mid-morning, a search of Martin's home turned up the breakthrough, a handwritten ledger from the 1990s, listing names, loan amounts, interest, rates, repayment deadlines. Next to July 15, 1997, S. Garner, loan, $500, due, year 2597. The due date, August 25th, was just 2 days after Steven vanished. With this evidence, the case was airtight. Now Maria just needed the truth about what happened that night and where Steven's body was. Thursday, March 30th, 2017, 2:00 p.m. Interrogation Room 3, Travis County Sheriff's Office. After 24 hours in custody, Victor Martin looked different. His eyes were sunken, his shoulders tense, his hands trembling slightly. Detective Delacroix began calmly. "Mr. Martin, we have your ledger. Steven Garner owed you $500. The deadline was August 25th, 1997. He disappeared on August 23rd after withdrawing $3,000 in cash. You were at his wedding on the 20th. Do you want to explain these coincidences?" Martin stared at his folded hands. His lawyer urged silence. For a long time, nothing. Then, in a low voice, "I'm not responsible for his disappearance. Things got out of hand. It wasn't supposed to happen like that." Partial admission. After 20 years, the dam was starting to crack. "Tell us what happened, Victor," Maria said softly. "It's been 20 years. You've carried this long enough." For the first time, Martin looked up. The coldness was gone. He looked tired, old. Steven wasn't a criminal, Martin began slowly. He was a good guy, paid on time. At first, never any trouble. But then he started losing big, kept borrowing to win it back. You know how it goes. Maria let him talk. She knew better than to interrupt now. By July, Martin continued, he owed me $800 with interest. A lot of money for a guy like him. He begged me for more time, told me about the wedding, the cash gifts, said he could pay me right after. So Martin pushed the deadline to August 25th. But I had my own creditors, Martin said bitterly. Real people, people you don't cross. If I didn't pay them by the end of August, I was a dead man. This was new. Martin wasn't just a predator. He was also prey, caught in a chain of debt and threats bigger than himself. I went to the wedding, he admitted flatly, posed as a friend. Nobody checked back then. Weddings weren't locked down like they are now. Maria pictured it. Martin, the wolf among the sheep, waiting for his moment while everyone else danced and drank champagne. I cornered him during the reception, Martin said. Told him I wanted my money. He was sweating bullets. Said he just needed a few more days. I gave him until the 25th, my last extension. Martin paused, took a sip of water. His hands shook. Then he called me August 22nd. Panicked, said. The wedding gifts weren't as much as he'd hoped. Most people gave blenders and china sets, not cash. He had $3,000 saved, but still owed me $5,000 more. He begged me to take the $3,000 now and wait for the rest. That matched the bank records perfectly. Steven had withdrawn $3,000 that day. I told him to meet me late, 11 p.m., downtown Austin, near the payphone on Congress Avenue. A quiet place, no one around. Maria's chest tightened. After 20 years, the final hours were coming into focus. He showed up right on time, Martin said, voice rough. Gave me the envelope. I told him he had 1 week for the rest, plus late fees. That's when he lost it. Said he couldn't pay. Said he was going to his wife, going to the cops. Said he'd rather die than ruin his marriage. Martin's face hardened. Going to the cops, you understand? With my record? With my creditors waiting on me? If he talked, I was done. Either the cops or my own people would kill me. I couldn't let him do it. Maria felt the room tighten. He started yelling. I snapped, punched him first. He fell. Then I hit him with a tire iron from my car, just to shut him up. Martin swallowed hard. I didn't mean to kill him, he whispered, but he didn't move after that. The room went silent. Steven Garner, dead over $500. Maria, voice steady, asked the question that mattered most. What did you do with his body? Martin lowered his head. I panicked, put him in my trunk, drove around all night. Just driving. At dawn, I buried him at an abandoned construction site near Round Rock. They built a warehouse there years ago. A parking lot covers it now, which explained why, after 20 years, Steven Garner's body had never been found. For 20 years, Steven Garner lay beneath the concrete of a sprawling industrial park north of Austin. Detective Maria Delacroix ended the interrogation exhausted, the weight of 2 decades pressing down on her shoulders. She finally had the truth, but it felt hollow. A man had died over a gambling debt, caught between his own desperation and the greed of a ruthless loan shark. Victor Martin was charged with murder and placed in custody. His attorney announced there would be no appeals. The confession was too complete, the evidence too strong. In the days following the confession, emotions ran high for everyone who had lived under the shadow of this mystery. For Emily, now 44, the news brought both relief and anger. Finally, she knew what had happened. But she also discovered the man she loved had hidden a secret life from her, a life that had cost him everything. Sitting in her living room in Hyde Park, with Paul at her side and her daughter Emma nearby, Emily told Detective Delacroix, I'm glad to finally know, but I'm angry too. If Steven had told me, we could have faced it together. His pride cost him his life. Paul stayed silent, sensing his wife would need time to reconcile the man she married with the truth she now knew. Emma, too young to grasp everything, only noticed her mother crying, but this time with a sad smile mixed with relief. Steven's parents, Michael and Frances Garner, both in their 70s, accepted the news with quiet dignity. "At least now we know he didn't abandon us," Frances whispered, tears in her eyes. Steven wasn't a coward. He was just a young man who made mistakes he couldn't fix. Michael, always a man of few words, simply held his wife's hand. For him, the truth confirmed what he had long suspected. His son was no runaway, no criminal, just a victim. Anthony Lewis felt the resolution most sharply of all. It was his forgotten camera, buried under decades of dust, that had cracked the case. But instead of satisfaction, he felt crushing guilt. "If I'd found those photos earlier," he told Maria bitterly, "Emily could have moved on sooner. Michael and Frances could have had answers before they got old. I wasted 20 years. Maria tried to comfort him. "You couldn't have known, Anthony. After the chaos of the disappearance, anyone could have missed it. What matters is, you found it. That's what counts." But Anthony couldn't shake the feeling. For 2 decades, the truth had sat in his attic, while he tortured himself with theories, sleepless nights, and false leads. Recovery efforts began immediately. Using Martin's confession and city records, investigators pinpointed the construction site, now a busy commercial complex with big box stores, restaurants, and paved parking lots covering what had once been empty dirt lots in the late 1990s. A judge ordered the area excavated. For 4 days, crews worked carefully under forensic supervision. On April 7, 2017, at 2:30 p.m., workers uncovered human remains beneath the parking lot of a Walmart supercenter. Dental records confirmed what everyone already knew. After 20 years, Steven Garner had been found. On April 15, 2017, exactly 20 years, 7 months, and 23 days after his disappearance, Steven was laid to rest in a small cemetery on the outskirts of Austin. The funeral was simple, attended by family, friends, and neighbors who had lived through 2 decades of uncertainty. Emily stood with Paul and Emma as Father Matthew Carter, the same priest who had married Steven and Emily 20 years earlier, led the service. "Steven was imperfect, Father," Carter said gently, "but he was loved, and love is what endures, even after tragedy." Anthony spoke briefly, voice breaking. "Steven was a good man who lost his way. He didn't deserve this. But today at least he can rest in peace. And so can we." Michael and Frances, aged but resolute, finally had a grave where they could leave flowers. In October 2017, Victor Martin was sentenced to 22 years in prison for second-degree murder. His confession and cooperation spared him life without parole. But at 60 years old, prison would likely be where he spent the rest of his life. "I know my words can't undo this," Martin told the courtroom. "I destroyed a family over money. I'll regret it until I die." Emily, seated in the front row, showed no reaction. Later she told reporters, "His apology doesn't bring Steven back, but at least justice was done." Detective Maria Delacroix retired shortly after the trial. "This case taught me something," she said in her farewell speech. "The truth always finds a way, even if it takes 20 years, even if it starts with one forgotten photograph." Anthony, carrying the weight of his role in solving the mystery, began speaking in schools about the dangers of gambling addiction. "My best friend died because of something we didn't talk about enough back then," he told students. "Now with online betting, it's even easier to lose everything. Don't wait until it's too late. Ask for help." Emily and Paul, free of the shadow that had loomed for half their marriage, renewed their wedding vows the following spring. Emma, now old enough to understand, learned the story honestly. Her parents explained that grown-ups sometimes make terrible mistakes, but what matters is learning from them, so history doesn't repeat itself. The Garner case became a cautionary tale across Texas, about gambling addiction, about family secrets, about how one bad decision can spiral into tragedy, and about how the truth, no matter how deeply buried, eventually comes to light.